welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book The Angel Raphael, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Dr. Antero da Silva was tired of life, distrustful of people, suspicious of women, and annoyed by his creditors. One day he decided it was time to say goodbye to this world. That was a real shame, because Antero was only 30 years old, in good health, and could have had a promising career if only he had been willing to change his ways. But in his mind, the problem wasn't him, it was everyone else. Every time a creditor knocked on his door, he would curse society itself. He believed he understood people, even though the only ones he had ever dealt with were a few dishonest men. He thought he knew women well, even though he had only met a handful of love-hungry flirts. In the end, our hero made up his mind. He was going to end his life. To do that, he went to the house of a widow named Laporte and bought a pistol. Then he returned home, which was on Rua da Misericordia. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Dr. Antero told his servant to set the dinner table. The journey is long, he thought to himself, and I don't know if there are any inns along the way. He actually had dinner calmly, as if he were going to take a nap instead of falling into eternal sleep. The servant himself noticed that his master was unusually cheerful that day. They talked happily through the whole meal. At the end of dinner, when the servant brought him coffee, Antero kindly said, "Pedro, take about 50 mil-rays from my drawer. They're yours. Go out for the night, and don't come back before dawn." "Thank you, sir," Pedro replied. "Go." Pedro hurried to follow his master's order. Dr. Antero went into the living room, lay down on the sofa, opened a volume of the Philosophical Dictionary, and began to read. By then the afternoon was turning into evening, and night was approaching. The doctor's reading would not last long. Indeed, after some time our hero stood up and closed the book. A cool breeze came through the room, promising a pleasant night. Winter had come, that gentle season the people of Rio de Janeiro are lucky to enjoy and grateful for. Dr. Antero lit a candle and sat at the table to write. He had no family, no friends to leave a letter for. Yet, he did not want to leave this world without saying his final words about himself. He took up the pen and wrote these lines. When a man, lost in the forest, finds himself surrounded by wild and treacherous animals, he tries to escape if he can. Usually, escape is impossible. But these human animals, as treacherous and wild as the others, were foolish enough to invent a weapon that allows someone lost to slip easily from their claws. That is exactly what I am about to do. I have beside me a pistol, powder, and bullet. With these 3 elements I will reduce my life to nothing. I leave behind no sorrow, nor do I take any with me. I die because I am tired of life and curious about death. Most likely, when the police find my body, newspapers will report the event, and 1 or 2 might offer some philosophical thoughts on it. I care very little for such comments. If I am allowed one last wish, I want these lines to be published in the journal do Commercio. Occasional poets will find material for a few verses. Dr. Antero reread what he had written, corrected the punctuation in a few places, folded the paper like a letter, and wrote on the outside, "To the world." Then he loaded the gun. And, to finish his life with a final act of defiance, the wad he pushed into the barrel of the pistol was a page torn from the Gospel of St. John. It was a dark night. Dr. Antero walked to the window, took a deep breath, looked up at the sky, and said to the stars, "See you soon." As he stepped away from the window, he added silently, "Poor stars. I would love to go there, but surely the worms of this earth will stop me. Here I am, and I am nothing more than a handful of dust." He was thinking that maybe, in the future, his own body could be used to pave Rua do Ouvidor. He preferred that idea. At least he would enjoy being stepped on by some pretty feet. As he had these thoughts, he reached for the pistol and looked at it with a kind of pride. "This," he said, "is the key that will open the door to my prison." Then he sat down on an armchair, put his feet up on the table in the American style, rested his elbows, and holding the gun with both hands, placed the barrel in his mouth. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, he heard 3 knocks on the door. Without thinking, he lifted his head. After a short silence, the knocks came again. The young man hadn't been expecting anyone, and he didn't care to speak with anyone at all. Still, even the calmest person, when they decide to end their life, often feels a quiet joy in finding a reason to wait just a little longer. Dr. Antero placed the pistol on the table and went to open the door. The person at the door was a man dressed very simply. He held a letter in his hand. "What do you want?" Dr. Antero asked. "I have a letter for you, from my master." Dr. Antero walked closer to the light to read the letter. It said, "A person who wishes to propose a business deal to Mr. Dr. Antero da Silva asks that you come to their house right away. The bearer of this letter will accompany you. It is a matter concerning a fortune." The young man read and reread the letter. He didn't recognize the handwriting, and the short message felt mysterious. "Who is your master?" Dr. Antero asked the servant. "His name is Mr. Major Thomas." "Thomas what? I don't know anything else." Dr. Antero frowned. What could this mystery be? A letter with no signature. A brief and unclear proposal. A servant who didn't even know his master's full name, all of it, was enough to awaken Dr. Anterosity in full force. Dr. Antero, though not a man prone to adventure, found himself so intrigued by this encounter that he momentarily forgot the grim journey he had so carefully planned. He studied the servant carefully. The man's face was plain, his gaze almost vacant. Clearly, he was no accomplice. There was even a crime hidden somewhere in this strange affair. "Where does your master live?" asked Dr. Antero. "In Tijuca," the servant replied. "Does he live alone?" "With his daughter." "A girl or a young woman?" "A young woman." "What kind of man is Major Thomas?" "I can't say," the servant answered. "I only started working there 8 days ago. When I arrived, my master told me, 'Jose, your job is to serve a lot, speak little, and see nothing, and that's exactly what I've done since.'" "Are there other servants in the house?" asked Dr. Antero. "There's a maid who takes care of the master's daughter." "No one else?" "No one else." The idea of suicide had now completely vanished from Dr. Antero's mind. What held him now was the mystery of this nighttime mission and the odd way the messenger had spoken. He also let go of the idea that this might be some kind of crime. His life had been so ordinary, so unnoticed by the world, that it was hard to believe someone wanted revenge against him. Still, he hesitated. But as he read the mysterious note again, his eyes landed on the final words. "It's about a fortune." Those words, which had barely moved him the first 2 times he read them, now struck him with full force. When a man is ready to end his life over simple frustration, the promise of wealth is more than enough reason to pause. In Dr. Antero's case, it was more than enough. It was decisive. If we look closely at the main reason for the boredom he felt toward the world, it was none other than the lack of money. Now that fortune seemed to knock at his door, suicide no longer made sense. Dr. Antero told the servant to wait and began to get dressed. Dr. Antero da Silva thought to himself, "In any case, there is always time. If I do not die today, I might die tomorrow." He dressed carefully, and remembering that it would be wise to carry a weapon, he placed a pistol in his coat pocket before stepping outside with his servant. Waiting for them at the street door was a carriage. The servant opened the door and invited Dr. Antero to enter. Then he climbed up to sit beside the driver. Although the horses moved at a fast trot, the journey felt long to the doctor. Despite the unusual nature of this adventure, he was eager to see how it would end. Yet, as the carriage moved farther from the city's crowded heart, a quiet fear began to grow inside him. He was reckless, not brave. His calmness in the face of danger did not come from courage. Deep down, he was weak. He could hide it when he felt in control. But now, with events beyond his grasp, his false bravery quickly faded. At last, the carriage reached Tijuca. After traveling a good distance along the winding road, it stopped before a country house, far removed from any other homes. The servant came around and opened the door. Dr. Antero stepped out, his legs slightly unsteady, his heart beating faster than usual. They stood before a closed gate. The property was surrounded by a low wall, and over it, Dr. Antero could see the main house, sitting quietly at the back of the land near the hillside. The carriage turned and drove away, while the servant used a key from his pocket to unlock the gate. The 2 men entered, and the servant, now locking the gate from the inside, pointed the way forward. "I do not wish to make my hero greater than he is." I must confess that at that very moment, Dr. Antero da Silva deeply regretted opening the door to the man who had brought the strange letter. If he could have run away, he would have done so, even if it meant being seen as a coward in the eyes of the servant. Dr. Antero walked slowly, his heart pounding, though he tried to hide his fear. The night was clear, but there was no moon. A soft wind moved the leaves of the trees, making a quiet sound. The doctor was on a long path, followed closely by his servant. The sand under their feet made a crunching noise with every step. He had no choice but to go forward. He had told himself he would be brave, and so he was brave enough to keep walking, even if his body wanted to run. He checked his coat pocket again, just to feel the cold handle of the pistol inside. It gave him some comfort, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. Halfway down the path, he asked the servant, "Will the carriage come back for us?" "I believe so, sir," the servant replied. "My master will decide that." A sudden idea came to the doctor. He could shoot the servant, climb the wall, and run back home. For a moment, he even pulled the gun halfway out of his pocket. But then he stopped. If he fired the gun, someone might hear. And if someone heard, he would never escape. So he put the gun away and kept walking. The house looked strange and silent. All the windows were shut. There was no light, no sound of voices, no sign of life. The servant took out a key and opened the door. As soon as the doctor stepped inside, the door closed behind him. The servant reached into his pocket again and pulled out a box of matches. He lit one and used it to light a wax candle. In the soft glow, the doctor saw that he was in a small courtyard. At the far end, there was a wooden staircase leading up. Near the front door was a small room behind iron bars. Inside it lived a huge dog. When the dog smelled people, it began to growl. "Quiet, Dolabella," the servant said firmly. Together they climbed the stairs. Then they walked down a long hallway until they reached a closed door. The servant took out a third key and unlocked it. "Please wait here," he said to Dr. Antero, opening the door. "I will let my master know you've arrived. Let me light a candle for you." He walked over to a small round table made of dark wood. On it sat a bronze candlestick. The servant lit the candle, then left the room, closing the door behind him. Dr. Antero found himself in a small room. On one side stood a tall bed. The furniture was plain, almost strict in style. There was only one window, and it had iron bars. On the table sat a few books, a quill, some paper, and a bottle of ink. It's not hard to picture how anxious the doctor felt, waiting for a reply from his mysterious letter writer. What he wanted most was to end this strange situation, which felt like something out of a Hoffman tale. The answer came quickly. The servant returned and said that Major Tomas could not speak to the doctor right away. He offered him a room and a bed for the night and asked him to wait until morning for an explanation. Antero insisted on speaking to the major that very night, claiming he had urgent business in town. If the major refused, he would come back the next day. The servant listened with great respect, but said he would not go back to his master. The major's orders were clear and firm. Antero tried to give the man money, but the servant refused the gift with such a serious look that the doctor had nothing more to say. "I was told," the servant said at last, "to bring you dinner." "I'm not hungry," replied Dr. Antero. "In that case, good night." "Goodbye." The servant turned toward the door while the doctor watched him with rising fear. Was he going to lock him in? And so he did. The man closed the door from the outside and took the key with him. No words could describe the long, painful night that followed. When the first rays of sunlight slipped through the bars of the window, they found the doctor still dressed, sitting on the bed. He had only managed to fall asleep at around 4 a.m. During that short sleep, our hero had a dream. He dreamed that his plan to end his own life had worked. He had been taken to the city of endless pain, where Beelzebub had chosen him to burn forever in a great fire. The poor man tried to argue with the angel of that dark place, but the angel gave only one reply, again and again, and made the order final. The doctor let out a scream and woke up. He was sweating, heart pounding like a war drum. One moment he was being dragged by 4 infernal chancellors into a blazing fire. The next he was sitting up in bed, confused and trembling. It took him a few seconds to realize he was no longer dreaming, or at least, not in the same kind of nightmare. He looked around the room. The walls were plain, the furniture sparse, the morning light slipping through a narrow window. Nothing felt familiar. Where was he? How had he gotten there? Panic rose in his chest like a tide. But slowly, piece by piece, his memory returned. The events of the previous night came back to him. The knock at the door, the man in uniform, the sudden order to follow. No explanation. No resistance. Just silence and obedience. He had been dreaming of hell, but now he was trapped in something just as confusing, just as cruel. He almost shouted again, just to break the stillness, but stopped himself. What good would it do? No one would hear him. Or where someone would. Minutes passed. Maybe 10. Maybe 20. Then he heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. The door opened, and a servant stepped in. In one hand, he held a stack of newspapers. In the other, a tray with bread, coffee, and butter. "You're already up," the servant said. "Yes," the doctor replied. "What time is it?" 8:00. "Here are today's papers." The doctor hadn't noticed the wash basin in the corner. He had been too lost in his own fear to think of washing his face. He stood up, walked over, and poured water from the pitcher into the basin. Cold water hit his skin, waking him up for real. While he dried his face, the servant asked, "When do you want breakfast?" "Breakfast?" the doctor asked, confused. "Yes, breakfast." "So I'm staying here longer?" "That's what I've been told," the servant replied. "My master wants to speak with you." "But I don't even know who he is. Why am I being kept here without explanation?" "Kept?" the servant asked, surprised. "You're not being kept. You have a room, a bed, and now breakfast. That's not being kept. That's being treated well." The doctor wiped his face, walked to the chair, and sat down. "What does your master want with me?" he asked. "I don't know," the servant said. "Now, about breakfast. When would you like it?" "Whenever you prefer," the doctor said, almost whispering. "All right then," the servant replied, placing the newspapers on the table. He gave a small bow and left the room, closing the door behind him. Each passing minute felt like an hour. Each hour, a lifetime. The doctor sat still, staring at the floor. The silence was unbearable, but what truly frightened him was the kindness. The breakfast. The clean sheets. The newspapers. It all felt like part of some cruel game, and he was the only player who didn't know the rules. The doctor couldn't stop wondering, who was this major, and what did he want with him? He asked himself the question 1,000 times, but no answer came. From the servant, he already knew he wouldn't get much. Besides being new to the house, the man seemed completely clueless. Could he be bribed? Dr. Antero asked himself this last question while putting his hand into his pocket and pulling out his wallet. He still had about 50 milre. That should be enough, he thought, to get this idiot to help me get out of here. What he forgot was that the day before, the servant had already refused money for a much smaller favor. At 9:00, the servant returned, carrying a delicate and appetizing lunch on a tray. Despite the seriousness of the situation, our hero attacked the meal with the boldness of a true battlefield general. In 20 minutes, the plates were left with only the dead and wounded. While eating, the doctor began to question the servant. "Tell me," he said, "would you do me a big favor?" "What kind of favor?" "I have 50 millet here for you. And tomorrow I can give you another 50, or 100, or even 200. All I ask is that you find a way to help me leave this house." "Impossible, sir," the servant replied with a smile. "I only obey my master." "Yes, but your master will never know I gave you money. You can tell him my escape was just a mistake. That way, we both stay safe. I'm an honest man. I can't take your money." The doctor felt defeated by the servant's strictness. He drank the last of the burgundy in his glass and stood up, making a gesture of despair. The servant wasn't moved. He prepared coffee for the guest and offered it to him. The doctor drank 2 or 3 sips and handed the cup back. The servant arranged the dishes on the tray and left. Half an hour later, the servant returned and said his master was ready to receive Dr. Antero. Dr. Antero wanted to leave the uneasy situation he was in and find out why he had been summoned, but the thought of finally meeting the feared and unknown major still unsettled him. He remembered there could be danger, and without thinking, checked his coat pocket for his pistol only to realize he had left it under his pillow when he went to bed. It was impossible to retrieve it now with the servant watching. He gave up. The servant opened the door, let him walk ahead, closed it behind them, and led the poor doctor down the same hallway they had taken the day before. They entered another hallway that led to a small room. There, the servant asked Dr. Antero to wait while he went to inform his master. He went into a room on the left and came back shortly, saying the major was ready to see the doctor. Dr. Antero walked into the room. At the far end, sitting in a leather armchair, was an old man, tall and thin, wrapped in a wide yellow dressing gown. The doctor took a few steps inside and stopped. The old man, pointing to a chair across from him, invited the doctor to sit. Dr. Antero obeyed without delay. They sat in silence for a moment. During that time, the doctor studied the man before him. Major Tomas' hair was completely white. His skin was pale and thin, almost lifeless. His eyes were sharp but sunken, like the last flicker of a candle about to go out, casting its final glow from deep within the candlestick. His lips were thin and colorless, and his nose was curved like an eagle's beak, resting above a thick mustache the same color as his hair. That mustache seemed to be the base of a tall, towering column. The major's face might not have seemed so harsh if not for his thick, heavy eyebrows. Their inner ends met just above the bridge of his nose. What made the image even more intense was how often the old man furrowed his brow, creating a deep line across his forehead. From a distance, that wrinkle looked like a natural extension of his nose, adding to the sense of severity. The silence stretched, and the doctor felt the weight of the moment. He had heard stories about this man, how he had once been a soldier, feared and respected, now reduced to a shadow of his former self. But even in that silence, the doctor could feel the strength still hidden beneath the fragile body. "Doctor," the major finally said, his voice low but firm, "you are late." The doctor found himself in a strange position, but no matter the situation, the major's presence was enough to stir unease. Maybe he was a good man at heart, but his looks gave off a strange, unsettling vibe. Dr. Antero didn't dare break the silence. He simply sat there, watching the older man. The Major, meanwhile, kept switching his gaze between the doctor and his own fingernails. His hands looked like claws long, bony and stiff. Dr. Antero could already imagine them digging into his skin. "Am I speaking to Dr. Antero da Silva?" the Major finally asked, his voice slow and heavy. "Yes, sir." "At your service." "At God's service," the Major replied with a strange faint smile. He paused, then added, "You're a medical doctor, right?" "Yes, sir." "I knew your father well. We fought together during the independence. He was only 2 years older than me. Poor Colonel. I still miss him." Dr. Antero took a breath of relief. The conversation was starting to flow, and the Major was revealing himself as someone close to his father. That gave the young man a bit of courage. "I feel the same, sir," he said. "A fine old soul," the Major went on. "Honest, cheerful, brave." "That's true," Dr. Antero agreed. The Major slowly lifted himself from the armchair, resting his hands on its wooden arms. His voice dropped to a whisper. "But more than anything," he said, "he obeyed those who come from the heavens." The doctor's eyes widened. He didn't quite understand what the Major meant by that. He couldn't imagine the Major was talking about religious faith. His father had always been seen as a firm believer in materialism, not spiritualism. Still, he didn't want to argue with the old man. He wanted to understand better. "Yes," Dr. Antero said carefully. "My father was deeply faithful." "Faith isn't enough," the Major replied, playing with the tassels of his robe. "I've met many faithful people who don't respect the messengers sent from above." He looked at the doctor and asked, "I suppose you were raised with the same views as your father?" "Yes, sir," Dr. Antero mumbled, confused and unsure of what the Major truly meant. The old man rubbed his hands together and twisted his mustache several times before finally asking his guest, "Tell me, were you treated well at my house?" "Magnificently," the doctor replied. "Then you'll live here however you like, for as long as you wish." "I would be very honored," the doctor answered, "but I can't say yes just yet. I came over right away because of your letter." "What is it you need from me, Your Honor?" "Two things, your company and your marriage. I'll give you a fortune in return." The doctor stared at the old man in surprise. Seeing the young man's shock, the old man smiled and said, "What's the matter? You look surprised." Yes, I admit it. I'm surprised about the marriage proposal. I don't understand how I deserve the honor of being offered a fortune just to marry your daughter." "I understand your surprise. That's the kind of thinking you pick up abroad. But I do things differently from most people. So, what do you say? Will you accept?" "Before anything else, Major, please answer me this. Why did you think of me?" "I was friends with your father. I want to honor his memory by offering you the hand of my only daughter." "So this is about your daughter?" "Yes, sir. This is about Celestina." As he said his daughter's name, the old man's eyes lit up more than ever. Dr. Antero looked at the floor for a moment and then said, "You know that love is what makes marriages happy. To give a young woman to a man she doesn't love is to give her a punishment, not a future." "A punishment? Oh, there you go again with that foreign way of thinking. My daughter doesn't even know what love is. She's an angel pure and innocent." As he said these last words, the old man looked up at the ceiling and stayed like that for a moment, as if seeing something the doctor could not. Then, after lowering his gaze once more, he continued, "Your objection means nothing." The old man's words still echoed in his mind as he sat alone in the small bedroom. "I wouldn't want to marry a girl without loving her." He had said it, and he meant, at least, he thought he did. But now, with the silence pressing in, he wasn't so sure. The Major had been strange, no doubt about it. His ideas didn't match the world outside these walls, and maybe that was why everything felt so off. Still, the man had offered him something hard to ignore: a daughter, a fortune, and a future far better than the one he had now. He paced the room, trying to make sense of it all. He had resisted, of course. He had brought up every possible doubt, every tiny problem. But was that really about principle? Or was it just fear? Fear of accepting something too good to be true? The truth was, the promise of wealth had softened the strangeness of the whole situation. And now, the only thing that mattered was meeting her. What if she was beautiful? What if she truly had the fortune the Major claimed? What harm could there be in marrying her then? As the time for dinner approached, his nerves grew sharper. He tried to distract himself. The servant had brought clean clothes, a towel, and even a warm bath. After cleaning up, he lay down on the bed and picked up a book from the nightstand of Anno, by Walter Scott. He opened it and tried to read, but the heavy language felt foreign. He had grown up reading fast-paced, dramatic stories by writers like Ponce du Terrail. Scott's style was too slow, too polite. His eyes closed before he reached the second page. He dreamed of castles, knights, and impossible choices. But when he woke, reality would be waiting, and with it, the girl. When he woke up, it was already late. He checked his watch and found it had stopped. He had forgotten to wind it. He worried that the servant might have come to call him and left, seeing him still asleep. It was a bad start to his life in the house of a man who might offer him the future he had long given up on. Imagine, then, the anxiety with which he waited for the hours to pass. Yet, despite his worries, his imagination kept working hard. It painted vivid pictures of the future: debts paid off, grand houses, elegant ballrooms, carriages, horses, trips abroad, and of course, women. In Dr. Antero's dreams, there were always one or two women. At last, the servant came to fetch him. The dining room was small, but tastefully and simply decorated. When the doctor entered, no one was there yet. But a few moments later, Major appeared, already dressed in a black overcoat, buttoned all the way to his neck. This contrasted with the white of his hair and mustache and the pale tone of his face. The Major sat at the head of the table, and the doctor sat to his left. The chair on the right was clearly meant for the Major's daughter. But where was the young woman? Dr. Antero wanted to ask the old man about her, but he caught himself in time, realizing the question might seem too personal. And worse than being improper, it would have been useless. A few minutes later, a door across from where the doctor sat opened, and a maid appeared, announcing the arrival of Celestina. The old man and the doctor stood up at once. The young woman entered. She was slim and delicate, neither tall nor short, but graceful beyond words. She didn't walk, she seemed to glide from the door to the table, as if her feet were dove's wings. The doctor was deeply surprised by her presence. Until then, he had imagined a girl who was neither beautiful nor ugly, a sort of burden that only a fortune could justify carrying. But now, standing before him, was a true beauty. She really did have an angelic face. Her expression revealed the innocence of her heart. Her calm, gentle eyes seemed made for quiet reflection. Her golden hair, falling in natural curls, looked almost like a halo. Her skin was pale and delicate, every feature perfectly balanced and graceful. Raphael could have used her face as the model for one of his virgins. She wore white. A blue ribbon pinned at her waist outlined her elegant, soft figure. Celestina approached her father and kissed his hand. Then she smiled at Dr. Antero and sat in the chair prepared for her. The doctor could not take his eyes off her. In this man's shallow mind, something deep was beginning to stir. A few moments after sitting down, the girl turned to her father and asked, "Is this the man who will be my husband?" "Yes," her father replied. "He's handsome," she said with a smile to the young man. There was such sweetness and simplicity in her question and comment that the doctor instinctively turned to the major, almost unable to believe what he had just heard. The old man understood the young man's surprise and smiled slyly. The doctor looked at Celestina again. She was watching him with such natural and sincere admiration that he actually blushed. They began to eat dinner. At first, the conversation was awkward and stiff, mostly because of the doctor, who kept getting more and more surprised. But soon, it became warm and open. Celestina was just as kind as her father. But her kindness was brightened by youth, and a kind of innocence so pure and untouched that the doctor felt as if he had stepped into a world he had never known. After dinner, they moved to the lounge room. That's what they called the sort of gallery where you could see the land around the house. Without waiting for him to offer, Celestina took the doctor's arm, and the two walked ahead of the major, who followed behind, mumbling verses from the Psalms of David. The three of them sat down in the room where people usually took their afternoon rest. It was twilight. The mountains and the sky were slowly removing the soft veil of the evening and putting on the darker one of night. The hour was perfect for tender feelings. Even though Dr. Antero had been raised in a world of logic and reason, he felt himself carried away by imagination's wings. They talked about all sorts of little things, nothing important really. The young girl told the doctor she was 17 years old and asked how old he was. Then she described her daily habits, her talents, her love for flowers, and how she adored the stars. She spoke with such charm that she seemed, somehow, both older and younger at the same time, like she was caught between youth and childhood. They returned to the subject of marriage. Celestina asked the doctor if he had any doubts about marrying her. "Not at all," he replied. "On the contrary, I would be very happy to. It's a great joy for me." "Did I tell you?" asked Celestina's father. "I always knew that once you saw her, you'd fall in love with her." "So I can count on you being my husband, right?" she asked. "Of course," the doctor said, smiling. After a short silence, Celestina looked at him and asked, "But what exactly is a husband?" The question caught him completely off guard. He couldn't hide his surprise. He glanced at the old major, but the man, leaning back in his wide armchair, had already started to fall asleep. The girl repeated the question with her eyes, just as clearly as she had with her lips. The doctor looked at her with a kind of love one that might have been the first true feeling of that sort in his life. Then gently he took her hand and brought it to his lips. Celestina trembled and let out a small cry, which startled her father awake. "What happened?" the major asked. "It was my husband," she said. "He kissed my hand." The major stood up slowly, gave the young man a serious, disapproving look, and said to his daughter, "All right. Go to your room." Celestina seemed a little surprised by the sudden order, but she obeyed without question. She said goodbye to the doctor with the same easy, innocent kindness she had used when speaking to him the first time. When the two men were finally alone, Major Vidigal took Dr. Antero by the arm and said to him, "My good sir, respect the people from heaven. I want a son-in-law, not a scoundrel. So, be careful." And with that, he left. The doctor stood there, stunned by the major's words. This was the third time the man had spoken about people or messengers from heaven. What could he possibly mean? A few minutes later, the servant came in with orders to escort the doctor to his room. The doctor obeyed without protest. That night was a terrible one for Dr. Antero. He had just witnessed scenes so strange, heard words so mysterious, that the poor young man began to wonder if it was all a dream. Unfortunately, it was not. Where was all this leading? What would come from the afternoon's confrontation? He felt fear, but now he no longer dared to think of escape. The image of the young woman had begun to tie him to that place. He went to bed late and slept badly, his dreams full of confusion. The next morning, he woke up early and received the daily newspapers from the servant. Until lunchtime, he tried to read the news of the world that now seemed far away, separated from him by an impossible distance. And there, in the pages of the Jornal do Comércio, he found the following. Suicide. 2 nights ago, Dr. Antero da Silva told his servant to leave and not return until early morning. He locked himself in his room, in the house he rented on Rua da Misericordia, and wrote the letter that our readers will find below. According to this letter, Dr. Antero declared his intention to take his own life. But the strange part of the story is that when the servant returned home early that morning, he found the letter but not his master. The servant immediately reported the situation to the police, who made every effort to discover what had happened to the young doctor. In fact, after careful investigation, a body was found on Santa Lucia Beach, and it was identified as that of the unfortunate young man. Although his letter stated he would use a pistol, it seems the poor soul chose a less violent way to end his life. Dr. Antero sat alone in the quiet of his room, the morning light slipping through the curtains like a whisper. The newspaper lay heavy in his hands, its words still burning in his mind. He had read the news twice already, but the meaning refused to settle. It was absurd, impossible even. Could it truly be true? Had his rival, his ghost, his shadow died? The paper claimed he had taken his own life. Some said it was love. Others, debts. But the letter told a different story. The same letter we saw in the first chapter. The very one that had haunted him since the night before. Antero felt dizzy. Was he still in the real world, or had he slipped into a dream? A cruel dream, full of shadows and echoes. For a moment, just a moment, he feared he might be losing his mind. But slowly, breath by breath, he came back to himself. He looked around as if asking the walls for answers. He read the news again. He read the letter again. The police had confirmed the identity, and at first, that had shaken him. But now, it made him smile. And even more absurd was the idea that love had driven the man to end his life. Love? That fragile, fleeting thing? When his servant returned, Antero asked quietly about the major and his daughter. "Miss Celestina is well," the servant said. "But the major, he cried last night. I heard him. And this morning he looked tired, like a man who hadn't slept." Antero listened in silence. He didn't know why, but he felt responsible for the old man's sorrow. It was the first time guilt touched his heart. The servant told him breakfast was ready. Antero walked to the dining room, where the major sat at the table. He did look tired, yes. But when he saw the doctor, he smiled warmly. Celestina entered soon after. She was radiant, as always graceful, carefree, untouched by the storm that swirled in Antero's mind. She kissed her father's forehead, greeted the doctor with a gentle squeeze of his hand, and took her seat. They ate in peace. The conversation was light, almost cheerful. Nothing seemed out of place. At the end of the meal, the major turned to his daughter with a smile. "Why don't you play for us this afternoon?" he said. "Something beautiful. Let the doctor hear how much you've improved." Celestina laughed, a soft, clear sound. She nodded, unaware of the weight in Antero's chest, unaware of the silence behind his smile. Meanwhile, Celestina wanted to show the young man her flowers, and her father gave her permission to do so. With a glance, the old man signaled for the servant girl to follow the two future fiancés. Celestina's flowers were all in half a dozen pots, placed neatly on the windowsill of her reading and study room. She called that little space her garden. It was very small, of course, and didn't take long to look at, but still, the doctor tried to stretch the moment as much as he could. "What do you think of these violets?" she asked. "They're absolutely beautiful," the doctor replied. Celestina gently arranged the leaves with her delicate little hand. The doctor reached out to touch them too. Their fingers met by accident. Celestina shivered slightly and looked down. A soft blush appeared on her cheeks. The young man worried that this small, unplanned touch might bring him guilt later. He decided to leave quickly. Celestina said goodbye and whispered, "See you soon, right?" "See you soon." The doctor left her room, already wondering how he would find his way back to his bedroom, when he ran into the servant waiting at the door, ready to guide him. "You seem like my shadow," the doctor joked with a smile. "I'm just your servant, sir," the man replied. As he entered his room, the young man was full of strong feelings. Little by little, he felt himself changing because of the girl. Even his worries began to fade away. He thought to himself that, next to her, he had nothing to fear. The newspapers were still on the table. He asked the servant if his master usually read them. "No, sir," the servant answered. "No one in the house reads them. They were only subscribed for you." "Only for me?" "Only for you." The seventh. Dinner and music brought the three guests together for nearly 4 hours. The doctor was in heaven. He had already started to see the house as his own. The life he was living now seemed like the best life in the world. 1 minute later, he thought, and I would have missed this happiness. Antero was no stranger to the ways of the world, but nothing could have prepared him for what came next. This was the first time he had ever felt love in its truest form. Celestina had appeared to him like a vision of earthly happiness, a living symbol of the heart's purest emotions. He looked at her with deep respect and tenderness. He could have stayed in that moment forever. But the conversation about marriage never happened again. The Major waited for the young man to speak up, and the young man waited for the right moment to confess his feelings to the Major. As for Celestina, even though she was sweet and full of life, she avoided bringing it up. Was it something her father had told her? At first, Dr. Antero thought so. But then he dismissed the idea. After all, everything in that house was so open and honest that such a warning would mean something truly serious had happened. A simple kiss on the hand didn't seem like a big enough reason to keep quiet. 5 days after arriving, the Major told him over breakfast that he wanted to talk. And sure enough, as soon as they were alone, the Major began to speak. "My dear doctor," he said, "you must have already noticed that I am not an ordinary man. In fact, I am not a man at all. I have lived among people, yes, but I was never one of them. I respect you because you have always treated me with kindness and never questioned where I came from. The reason I left the world behind is simple. No one else ever respected me the way you have." Although Antero had heard hints of this before, the words still shocked him. He could not find a reply. His eyes grew wide, his mouth slightly open. He looked like someone frozen in time, caught between surprise and confusion. "I am," the old man continued calmly, "the Angel Raphael, sent by the Lord to this valley of tears to find a few good souls for heaven. But I failed. The moment I told people who I really was, they called me a fraud. I could not bear their mockery and anger. So I came here, and I will stay here until the day I die." The Major spoke with such calm certainty that had he been speaking to anyone less experienced in life, that person might have fallen to their knees then and there. But Dr. Antero, though shaken, remained seated, still trying to understand what he had just heard. Antero saw nothing more than a harmless obsession in the Major's claim of divine origin. He knew it was pointless and even risky to argue. "You did the right thing," the young man said, "leaving the world behind. What does the world really offer that's worth a great sacrifice? Humanity isn't changing anymore. If Jesus came back today, they probably wouldn't even let him give the Sermon on the Mount. They'd kill him on day one." The Major's eyes lit up as he listened to the doctor's words. When Antero finished, the old man threw his arms around his neck. "You've spoken pearls," he said. "That's how it should be seen. I can see clearly now your father's son. I've never heard anything but respect from that dear friend of mine. You have his same blood in your veins." Dr. Antero responded as best as he could to the emotional embrace of the Angel Raphael, whose eyes seemed to shoot sparks of fire. "Well then," the old man went on, sitting back down, "that's exactly what I hoped to find. A young man of good character, who could give my daughter the life she deserves, and who wouldn't doubt my nature or my mission. Tell me, do you love my daughter?" "Very much. She's an angel." "Of course she is," the Major interrupted. "What else could she be? And you'll marry her, right?" "Without a doubt." "Good," said the Major, looking at the doctor with such a warm fatherly gaze that the young man felt deeply moved. At that moment, Celestina's maid walked through the room. As she passed behind the Major's chair, she shook her head with a look of pity. The doctor caught the gesture meant only for him. "The wedding will happen soon," the Major continued once they were alone again. "And as I told you, I'll give you a fortune. I want you to believe me. I'll show you." Dr. Antero refused to go see the supposed fortune, though to be honest, his refusal was more formality than conviction. The angelic atmosphere of the house had already done him some good, but deep inside, a part of him remained of the man, the one who had spent half his life chasing wild dreams and reckless passions. When the old man insisted, Dr. Antero agreed to follow him. They walked into a small study where the Major kept his books. The Major locked the door and told the doctor to press a hidden lever cleverly built into the spine of a fake book placed among real ones on the shelf. The doctor did as he was told. That whole row of books was an illusion. With a quiet click, a small door opened, revealing a dark space behind it. Inside were 5 or 6 iron boxes. "These boxes," said the Major, "hold 100 contos de rey. They're yours." The doctor's eyes lit up. Before him stood a fortune, and all he had to do was take it. The Major asked him to close the hidden door again, showing him how to do it. "You're the first one I've ever shown this to," the old man added. "But it feels natural. I already see you as my son." And with that, they returned to the sitting room, where Celestina soon joined them. The sight of her brought the young man a pleasant distraction, enough to forget, for a while, the iron boxes and the treasure they held. That very night, they set the wedding date only 1 month away. Dr. Antero seemed more than happy to agree to everything. His eagerness was so great that the old man no longer saw any reason to keep him confined. He gave him permission to leave the house, but the doctor said he would not leave until after the wedding. "Afterward will be harder," the Major warned. "Fine," the doctor replied. "Then I won't leave at all." His real plan was to leave after the wedding, but for now, he didn't want to risk his happiness. Celestina was delighted with the idea of marriage. It was a welcome break from the quiet boredom of her days. They all parted after dinner, and by then the doctor noticed that his servant was nowhere to be found. He was free to go wherever he pleased. But instead of wandering, he went straight to his room. The situation was taking on a new shape. It wasn't a crime or an ambush. It was a man obsessed. Fortunately for the young man, this obsession required exactly what he was already willing to do. All things considered, happiness had come through the door in a surprising way he couldn't even imagine when standing at the edge of the grave. Dreaming of bright things, the boy fell asleep. 8. The next day was Sunday. After reading the news and some political articles, he turned to the lighter sections of the paper. By chance, one of them talked precisely about the suicide of Dr. Antero da Silva. The posthumous letter was the subject of jokes and casual remarks by the columnist. One sentence read, "If it weren't for this man's suicide, I wouldn't have anything pleasant to write about today." Luckily, he remembered to die just in time, a rare thing, not only for a husband but even for a government minister. Dying was nothing. Dying and leaving behind such an amusing letter as the public read at was the real kindness to a writer in need of inspiration. Please forgive the French expression, dear reader. It came naturally from the topic. In convinced that Dr. Antero and may his name not suffer for it, Must have read some French novel where he found a model for that letter. Unless, of course, he wanted to prove to us that he wasn't just a man of modest intelligence, but also a great fool. Anything is possible. The doctor crumpled the newspaper when he finished reading the article. But then he smiled philosophically. In the end, he even agreed with the writer. After all, the letter he had written with so much heart, believing it would move the public, now seemed like pure nonsense. He would have given one of the major's iron boxes not to have written it. But it was too late. Yet the pain from the article wasn't the only blow he received that day. Further down, he found an invitation to a mass for his own soul. The servant Pedro invited people to the funeral mass, not his friends. Still moved by the generous gift of 50,000 rei, he felt it was his duty to pray for his master's soul. Good Pedro, the doctor thought. Just as he had experienced his first love and first regret in that house, he now shed his first tear there too, tear of gratitude for his loyal servant. Called to breakfast, Dr. Antero joined Major and Celestina. By then, the key to the room stayed with him. For no clear reason, he found Celestina more angelic than ever, and also more serious than usual. Did this seriousness mean she was finally starting to care for him? He believed so, and as a novelist, I'd say he was right. Still, her seriousness didn't take away from her kindness or her playful spirit. It was a fleeting kind of seriousness, more like a dreamy mood, or a quiet moment of thought, the early signs of love, which brought color to her cheeks and seemed to place a soft glow around her head. Since they were already close and comfortable with each other, Dr. Antero asked Celestina at the end of breakfast to play some music. She played beautifully. He leaned against the piano, eyes fixed on her, his soul lost in the melodies her fingers brought to life. In those moments, he forgot the rest of the world and lived only for her, the woman who would soon become his wife. Meanwhile, the major paced the room with his hands behind his back, deep in thought. Love is selfish. In the presence of the woman who charmed and drew him in, the young man didn't even spare a glance for the poor old man who was giving him both a wife and a fortune. From time to time, the major would stop and exclaim, "Bravo! Bravo! One day you'll play like that on the harps of heaven." "Do you enjoy hearing me play?" she asked the doctor. It would be worth dying just to hear this music. After about 15 minutes, the major left, leaving the two fiancés alone in the room. It was the first time they were by themselves together. The young man didn't dare to repeat the scene from the other afternoon. There could be another scream from the girl, and everything would be lost for him. But his eyes, helplessly fixed on hers, spoke louder than any words in the world. Celestina looked at him with the trust of innocence and modesty, with the confidence of someone who doesn't suspect evil and only knows good. The doctor understood that he was love. Celestina didn't understand it. She felt, however, that she was tied to this man by something stronger than her father's words. The music had stopped. The doctor sat in front of the girl and said to her, "Will you marry me by your own choice?" "Me?" she replied. "Of course I will. I like you. Besides, my father wants it, and when an angel wants something." "Don't joke like that," said the doctor. "It's not your fault." "Joke about what?" "About your father." "Oh, come now." "He's a madman." "I don't know any unhappy angels," replied the girl with such childlike charm and such sincere belief that the doctor frowned in surprise. The girl continued, "He must be so happy. I wish I could be an angel like him. And since he is my father, I must be one too. In fact, I think I am angelic as well." The doctor turned pale. He stood up so suddenly that Celestina couldn't help but show a sign of fear. "Oh, what's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," the young man said, wiping his forehead. "Just a moment of dizziness." At that moment, the major entered the room. Before he could ask anything, his daughter ran to him and said that the doctor wasn't feeling well. The young man said he was better now, but both father and daughter insisted that he should go rest for a while. The doctor obeyed. When he reached his room, he threw himself onto the bed and lay still for several minutes, lost in thought. The girl's strange words told him that there wasn't just one madman in that house. All her charm and beauty meant nothing. The poor girl was just as mad as her father. Dr. Antero stood in his room, heart pounding. The pieces didn't fit, and yet they did. Both of them, Celestina and her father, shared the same strange obsession, as if some invisible thread tied their minds to the heavens. He asked himself 1,000 questions, but none had an answer. All he knew for sure was that the dream he'd built for himself had just collapsed. There was only one thing left to do: take the leave offered by the old man and get out of that house. It felt cursed, filled with shadows and secrets. At dinner, he told Major Vidigal he planned to go into town the next morning to take care of some documents and would return by afternoon. The major nodded, satisfied. The next day, right after breakfast, Antero began packing. Before leaving, he promised Celestina he would return soon. She begged him not to go, her voice trembling with emotion. For a moment, he hesitated. But what else could he do? The only choice was to run from that house, from those strange beliefs, from the girl who looked at him like she knew something he didn't. Just as he was ready to leave, someone knocked softly on his door. He opened it. It was Antonia, Celestina's maid. Antonia was around 40 years old. Not ugly, not beautiful, just plain, with features that didn't stand out. But her eyes, they carried kindness and something deeper. She rushed in and fell to her knees. "Don't go, doctor. Please, don't go." "Stand up, Antonia," he said, surprised. She stood, but repeated the same words. "You don't want me to go?" he asked. "Why not?" "Save that girl." "What? Is she in danger?" "No, but she must be saved. Don't pretend you don't understand. You want to leave for good?" "I don't," he lied. "You do. And I'm begging you, please, don't go. At least not until tomorrow." "But why? Tell me now." "I can't. Someone might come. But tonight come midnight, when she's asleep, he'll come here and explain everything. But promise me you'll stay." He answered without thinking. "I promise." Antonia left quickly, her footsteps almost silent on the floor. Dr. Antero sat in his room, trying to make sense of the storm inside him. The past few days had brought a whirlwind of emotion choke, fear, mystery, and something else he couldn't name. It was no wonder his mind felt shaken, almost as shaken as the Major's. For a moment, he wondered if he was losing control. As soon as Antonia left, he sat down, trying to understand what danger he needed to protect the girl from. But he couldn't find an answer. So he made up his mind to go to her, or to the Major, and demand the truth. Just as he stood up to leave, someone knocked and entered. It was the Major. He looked cheerful, almost playful. "Well, well, good to see you," the old man said with a grin. "This is the first time I visited you in your own room." "That's true," said Dr. Antero. "Please, sit down." "I wouldn't come here for nothing," the Major added, taking a seat. "This is serious." "Oh? Guess who's dead?" the Major asked. "No idea." "The devil." The doctor gave a small jump. The Major laughed, a strange, nervous laugh. "That's right," the Major went on. "The devil is dead. And that's the best news I've ever had in my life. What do you think of that?" "I suppose it's good news for all of us," said Dr. Antero calmly. "But how did you hear this?" "By a letter I received today from my friend Bernardo. You might know him. He was also a friend of your father." "I haven't seen Bernardo in 12 years. He just came back from the north and wrote to me right away with this wonderful news." The Major stood up and began to walk around the room, smiling to himself. He stopped now and then to look at the doctor, as if enjoying the moment. "Tell me," the Major said after a pause, "don't you think this is the best gift I could have before my daughter's wedding?" "I do," said the young man, standing up. "And since the enemy of light is gone, let's not speak of him anymore." "You're absolutely right," the Major agreed. "Let's forget about him." Dr. Antero steered the conversation towards safer topics: military campaigns, literature, farming, anything to keep Major Xavier away from talk of angels or devils. Eventually, the Major got up to leave, saying he was expecting Colonel Bernardo, a close friend, for dinner, and that he would be delighted to introduce him to the doctor. But dinner time came and went, and the Colonel never arrived. The doctor became convinced that the Colonel, the letter, and the devil were all just inventions of the Major's mind. He should have realized that from the start. Yet if he had believed that, he would have been wrong, because Colonel Bernardo showed up at the house just as evening prayers began. The Colonel was a large man, strong and sturdy, with a red face and bright eyes. He spoke quickly, energetically, as if he had never worried about anything in his life, or felt a moment of regret. He looked about 40 but was actually 52. He wore a military-style overcoat. The Major greeted him with loud enthusiasm, hugging him warmly and introducing him to Dr. Antero as one of his dearest friends. Then he introduced the doctor to the Colonel, adding at once that the doctor would soon be his son-in-law. He sent for his daughter, who didn't take long to come into the living room. When the Colonel saw Celestina, his eyes filled with tears. He had last seen her as a little girl, and now she stood before him grown into a beautiful young woman. He hugged her with the warmth of a father. The four of them talked together for about half an hour. During that time, the Colonel spoke rapidly, telling many stories and details from his life in the countryside. His lively chatter was a sharp contrast to the Major's slow, careful way of speaking. After that half hour, the Colonel said he needed to speak privately with the Major. Dr. Antero excused himself and went to his room, followed shortly by Celestina, who also left the room. The colonel and the major stayed alone in the living room. No one could hear what they were saying, but the servant noticed that the colonel only left the room at midnight and went straight to the bedroom that had been prepared for him. As soon as the doctor entered his room, he saw a letter lying on the table. It was addressed to him. The clock struck midnight when a soft knock echoed through the quiet room. Dr. Raphael stood up, closed the book gently, and walked to the door. He opened it slowly, and in came Antonia. She moved with care, as if afraid that even the sound of her footsteps might betray her. He guided her to a chair, and she sat down with a tired sigh. "Thank you for staying," she said. "I need to tell you what danger now threatens poor Celestina." "Danger to her life?" he asked. "More than that." "Her honor, then?" "No, less than that." He looked at her, puzzled. "Then what is it?" "The danger to her mind. I fear she may lose her reason." "Lose it?" the doctor said with a sad smile. "Are you sure she hasn't already?" "I am sure. But she could go just like her father." "Him? He is already lost." "Who knows? Maybe not." Antonia shook her head. "He must be. It's been 12 years since he lost his mind. Do you know why it happened?" "I don't. I came to work here 5 years ago. At the time, Celestina was only 10 years old, just as sweet and lively as she is now. But she has never left this house. I think she has seen no more than 10 people in all her life. She knows nothing of the world." He listened, his face serious. In his hand, he still held the letter she had sent him. He read it again in silence. "My fiancé," it said, "I write to ask you not to forget me, to dream of me, and to love me as I love you, your fiancée, Celestina." That was all. A short love letter, different from the letters usually written in such situations. It was simple, honest, bold, and true. He kissed the paper and held it close to his heart. To pass the time before Antonia arrived, he had picked up a book from the table. It was Paul and Virginia. He had never read it before. His life and education had kept him far from such stories. But tonight, his heart was ready to feel its beauty. He sat down and read half the book in one go. Now, with Antonia in front of him, the story of Celestina's strange life and her father's madness weighed heavily on his mind. He thought of her, a young woman raised in silence, without the world, without friends, without even the freedom to dream beyond the walls of that house. And yet, she had written to him with a love so pure it made his chest ache. "What do we do now?" he asked. "That," Antonia said, "is for you to decide." The father, already convinced at that time and still today that he was the Angel Raphael, kept telling his daughter this over and over. Because of that, she truly believed she was the daughter of an angel. I tried to talk to her, to explain that this wasn't true. But she told the major what I had said, and he threatened to fire me if I kept filling his daughter's head with bad ideas. According to him, it was wrong to tell the girl that he wasn't really an angel, but just a poor mad man. And what about her mother? I never met her. I asked Celestina about her, and found out that even she didn't know who her mother was. The reason, I was told, was that she had never had one. Antonia said she had heard from her father himself that Celestina had come into the world through the work and grace of heaven. You see, the girl isn't crazy. But where will these ideas lead her? Doctor was deep in thought. Now he understood the strange things she had said while playing the piano. What Antonia told him made sense. Someone needed to help Celestina, and the best way was to get her out of that house. Marriage, he thought, would be the best solution. You're right, good Antonia, he said. Well, save Celestina. You can count on me. Swear it, she asked. I swear. Antonia kissed the young man's hand, tears of joy rolling down her face. To her, Celestina was more than just a servant. She was like a daughter, raised in loneliness. The maid left the room, and the doctor went to bed not only because it was late, but also because his mind needed rest after so much shock and emotion. The next day, he spoke to the major about moving the wedding date forward. That meant getting the necessary documents ready as soon as possible. They agreed the ceremony would take place in the house chapel. The major even allowed a priest to perform the ceremony. His reasoning was simple. If Celestina, as the daughter of an angel, was above the need for a priest, the same couldn't be said for the doctor, who was, after all, just a man. As for the documents, a problem came up when they had to write down the name of the bride's mother. The major made it very clear. Celestina had no mother. The colonel, who had been standing nearby, stepped into the conversation and said something to the major words the doctor couldn't quite catch, but that clearly struck a nerve. Thomas! Remember what happened last night, the colonel said. The major fell silent at once. Then, turning to Dr. Antero, the colonel added, Everything will be sorted out. Don't worry. That was the end of the conversation. But it was more than enough for the doctor to realize that Colonel Bernardo held the key to the whole mystery. The young man didn't waste time, waited for the first chance to talk privately with the colonel, hoping to clear up the 1,000 confusing details that had been haunting him for days. Celestina had not been part of the discussion. She was in the other room, playing the piano. The doctor went to find her and found her looking sad. He asked why. I know, she replied. It feels like you don't love me anymore. And if you ask me why people fall for each other, I can't explain it. I just don't know. The young man smiled, took her hand in his, held it gently, and brought it to his lips. This time, Celestina didn't pull away or cry out. She simply stared at him, completely absorbed, hanging on his every look, you could even say, hanging on his soul. The next night, Dr. Antero was walking in the garden, just below Celestina's window. She had no idea he was there, and he made no move to let her know. He was happy just watching from a distance, catching every now and then the soft shadow of her graceful figure on the wall inside. The moon was bright, and the sky was clear. Until that night, the doctor had never really noticed the magic of the night, nor cared for its secrets. But now he found peace in the silence, the shadows, and the solitude. As he stood there, completely lost in the sight of her window, he felt a hand tap his shoulder. He shivered and turned quickly. It was the colonel. Well now, dear doctor, said the colonel with a grin. Are you writing a love story before the wedding even happens? And just enjoying the cool air, the doctor replied. The night is beautiful, and inside it's too warm. They walked slowly through the garden, the night air cool against their skin. The colonel spoke first. This is true. I also came out here to enjoy the fresh air. Shall we walk together if I'm not interrupting your thoughts? Quite the opposite, the doctor replied. I'm actually glad. Did you find me then? That's right. Well then, even better. Their voices, low but clear, reached the room of Celestina. She had been lying on her bed when she heard them. Curious, she rose and went to the window, trying to see who was outside. There she is, the colonel said, pointing. Look. The two men moved closer. From the window, Celestina asked, Who is it? It's you, Celestina, the colonel called. Me and your fiancé. Oh. What are you two doing out there? You can see for yourself. Taking the evening air. There was a pause. Doctor, she asked, won't you say anything to me? I'm watching you. That's kind of you, she said. But since the night air might not be good for me, good night. Good night. She stepped back, closed the window gently, and soon the room was quiet again. The two men walked to a wooden bench at the far end of the garden and sat down. So you really wanted to meet me? The doctor asked. I did, Colonel. I need to ask you something. And I'll answer. Do you know what it is? I can guess. Even better. That saves me from a long explanation. You want to know who Celestina's mother is? That's my first question. And after that? I want to understand why the Major is acting this way. You don't know anything about it? Not a thing. I only came here because of a strange situation I'll tell you about. The doctor began to explain. He told the colonel how a letter and a message had brought him to that house. He didn't hide the fact that the Major's invitation had arrived just when he was thinking of ending his own life. He also confessed that entering that house had changed him. Before, he had been a bitter and useless man. Now, he felt like he had a purpose again. The colonel listened carefully. When the doctor finished, he said, If we're trading confessions, then let me share mine. The colonel began his story. I was close friends with your father and the Major. Your father died many years ago. The Major and I remained, like the last two of the three Haredi brothers. That's what people called us back then. The Major was married, and I was single. One day, for reasons that don't matter now, the Major began to suspect his wife had been unfaithful, and he threw her out of their home. I believed in her betrayal too, and partly supported the Major's decision. I say partly because the very next day, the poor woman had nothing to eat, and it was from me that she received some food. She swore her innocence with tears in her eyes, but I didn't believe those tears or her words. The Major lost his mind and moved into this house with his daughter and never left again. Unexpected events forced me to travel north not long after, and I stayed there until very recently. And I wouldn't have come back if not the colonel paused. What is it? The doctor asked him. Don't you see a figure over there? Where? There. Indeed, a shadow was moving toward the two men. A few steps away they recognized it was the servant Jose. Colonel, sir, said the servant, I've been looking for you. Why? Your master wants to speak with you. All right. I'm coming. The servant left, and the colonel continued. I wouldn't have returned if I hadn't become certain that the Major's suspicions were completely wrong. What do you mean? Well, many years later, I met the Major's wife in the province where I was living. She was working as a maid. She had lived an honest life. The people I talked to confirmed everything she had said. The suspicions were based on a letter found in her possession. But that letter, although it did point to a woman's wrongdoing, didn't point to Fernande, pointed to someone else. And I heard the truth from that woman herself, just as she was dying. I realized that maybe, just maybe, telling the Major all this could bring him back to his senses. So I came back, in fact, and told him everything I knew. And what did he say? He doesn't believe me. And when it seems like he might finally be convinced by what I've told him, he goes back to saying he's not really married, because angels don't get married. You know the rest. So Hez beyond help? I believe so. In that case, said the doctor, we must save his daughter. Why? Because Major Thomas raised Celestina in complete isolation ever since she was a little girl and filled her head with the idea that she is possessed. I fear the poor girl may suffer the same fate. Rest easy. The wedding will happen as soon as possible. You can take her away from here. If we can't convince him, you'll leave without his knowledge. The two men stood up. As they approached the house, the servant came out to meet them with a new message from the Major. He seems unwell, the servant added. Unwell? Colonel Miguel hurried to his friend's side, while Dr. Lucas went to his room to wait for news. When Colonel Miguel entered the Major's room, he found him deeply troubled. The old man was pacing back and forth, speaking in a confused way, his eyes wild with fear. What's wrong, Tomas? I'm glad you came, the Major said. I feel terrible. An angel came here earlier. He told me I was missed in heaven. I think this time I really am leaving. Stop that, the colonel replied. It was just the angel teasing you. Rest, calm down. The colonel helped the Major lie down. He checked his pulse and felt the fever rising. He decided it was wise to send for a doctor and gave the servant the order. The fever calmed a little, and the Major managed to sleep. The colonel had a bed prepared in the same room. After informing Dr. Lucas about what had happened, he returned to stay by his friend's side. The next day, the Major felt better when he woke up. The doctor had arrived just before dawn, but didn't give any medicine, choosing instead to stay in case things got worse. As for Celestina, she knew nothing of what had happened. She woke up cheerful and full of life, more than ever before. But by afternoon, the fever returned to the Major, this time with great force. Soon after, it became clear that death was near. The colonel and Dr. Antero made sure to keep Celestina away, for she didn't yet understand what death meant and might suffer greatly seeing her father in his final moments. Surrounded by his two friends, the dying Major begged them urgently to bring his daughter to him, but they refused. Then the poor old man pleaded with the doctor to marry her, and at the same time repeated his promise that he would leave her a fortune. And then, at last, he passed away. It was agreed between the colonel and the doctor that Celestina would only be told of her father's death after the burial, and that the funeral would be held with the utmost discretion. That's exactly what happened. When the Major didn't appear for breakfast or dinner the next day, Celestina was told it was because he was in a meeting with some close friends. So, while her father's body lay in one part of the house, Celestina laughed and chatted at the table, as if it were any other day. But once the burial was done, it was time to tell her the truth. "Celestina," said the colonel gently, "you'll be marrying Dr. Antero soon." "But when?" she asked. "Very soon. That's what you've been saying for days. Well, now it's really happening. Your father. What about him?" "Your father won't be coming back for a while." "He won't come back? Where did he go?" "Your father went to heaven." The girl turned pale at the news. She didn't fully understand the meaning of those words, but her heart sensed that behind them lay a terrible truth. The colonel tried to comfort her, but Celestina, shedding only two tears that spoke louder than 100 said with deep sorrow, "My father went to heaven and didn't even say goodbye to me." Then she went to her room and didn't come out until the next day. The colonel and the doctor spent the night together. The doctor revealed that the major's fortune was hidden behind a bookshelf in the library, and that he knew how to open it. Together, they decided to move forward with Celestina's wedding as quickly as possible, without breaking any laws. The first thing to do, of course, was to get the girl out of that house. The colonel suggested the home of a female relative of his, where she could go the very next day. Once they had agreed on these small details, the colonel turned to the doctor and asked, "Well then, tell me, don't you believe now that there's some kind of divine guidance in life?" "I always believed," the doctor replied. "Don't lie. If you truly believed, you wouldn't have tried to take your own life." "You're right, Colonel. Let me even say this. Back then, I was like mud. Today I feel like a pearl." "You understand me well. I wasn't talking about the fortune you found here. I meant your change from within, this moral rebirth you've experienced since coming here, thanks to the air, and to watching that beautiful girl, Celestina." "You're right, Colonel," the doctor said. "As for the fortune, I'm ready to." "To what?" "That money belongs to Celestina. You shouldn't give it away. But people might think that the marriage..." "Let them think. My friend, why should you care what people think? Don't you have your own conscience, which accuses you of nothing?" "That's true. But what about public opinion?" "Listen, my dear Doctor, public opinion is nothing more than an opinion. It's not truth. Sometimes it gets things right, but often it lies. And sadly, it usually lies more than it tells the truth." When it came to public opinion, the colonel was a total unbeliever. He denied its authority completely. One of his favorite sayings was this: "Public opinion is like a blank wall. It accepts anything written on it, whether by a child's hand or by a decent man." It wasn't easy for the doctor and the colonel to convince Celestina that she should leave that house. But in the end, they managed to take her to the city late at night. The colonel's relative, who had been warned in advance, welcomed her into her home. Once the legal matters were settled, they began to plan the wedding. But before reaching that long-awaited moment, the wedding itself, they needed to help Celestina get used to the new life she was beginning. A life she had never known before. Celestina grew up inside the quiet walls of a secluded house, far from the noise of the world, raised under the care of a man whose mind was not always clear. When she finally stepped into society, It was like entering a completely new universión she had never imagined or even heard of. Everything fascinated her. Every day brought something fresh and surprising. She amazed everyone with her talent for music, even though her education had been so unusual. She had, in fact, been taught by a piano teacher hired by her uncle, Major X. He said he wanted to prove that an angel, especially the Angel Raphael, could do things just like ordinary people. And when it came to reading and writing, he had taught her himself. Not long after returning to the city, Dr. Antero made sure to write a letter to his friends that said, Dr. Antero da Silva, recently deceased by his own hand, has the honor of informing you that he has returned from the other world and is now available to receive visits at the hotel. His living room quickly filled with people who had rushed to see him. A few skeptics thought it might be a joke played by someone who liked to trick others. The room buzzed with voices. You didn't die. No way. You're alive. But what happened? This must be a miracle. Miracle? No, the doctor replied. It was simply a clever trick to see how people would react to my death. I learned everything I wanted to know. Oh, said one guest. The reaction was deep. Ask Cesar. When we heard the news, Cesar added, we didn't want to believe it. We ran to your house, and unfortunately, it was true. What a joke, shouted a third man. Making us cry for you when you were probably nearby. He'll never forgive you for those tears. But, the doctor interrupted, the police even seemed to confirm my body. They said they did, and I believed it. So did I. Just then, a new figure walked into the room. It was Pedro, the servant. The doctor pushed through the crowd and rushed to hug Pedro, who began to cry tears of joy. The warmth shown to a servant, compared to the cool reception the doctor gave his friends, made them uncomfortable. It was obvious. They left soon after, saying that seeing him happy inspired them to throw him a dinner party. The doctor turned down the offer. The next day, the newspapers announced that Dr. Antero da Silva, believed to be dead, had returned alive. That very day, the doctor received visits from his creditors, who now saw a long-buried debt rise from the grave. The journalist from one of those papers who had written about the doctor's death and the letter he left behind began his next Saturday column like this. They say the author of that letter I wrote about has come back. Is it true? If he's back, he's not the real author. If he wrote the letter, then he never returned. The so-called resurrected man replied, I came back from the other world, and yet I am the author of that letter. From the place I come, I brought a useful philosophy, hold the opinion of my contemporaries in no regard, and even less that of my friends. I brought other things too, but the public won't care much for them. 3 months later, the wedding took place. Celestina had changed completely. She no longer had that wild, ignorant energy that once defined her, nor the strange ideas the Major had planted in her mind. The Colonel attended the ceremony. A month later, he came to say goodbye to the newlyweds before returning to the north. Goodbye, my friend, said the doctor. He'll never forget what you did for me. I didn't do much, replied the Colonel. I only helped Good Luck along. Celestina cried as she said goodbye. Why are you crying, Celestina? The old man asked. He'll be back soon. Do you know why she's crying? The doctor asked. I told you her mother is in the north. She misses her. Shall see her again, said the Colonel, because I'm going to bring her here. When Colonel left, Celestina wrapped her arms around her husband's neck and said, with a smile between tears, "By your side and my mother's, what else could I possibly want in this world?" In the young woman's vision of happiness, the Colonel no longer had a place. Oh love, oh heart, oh human selfishness.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.